Hello, I'm Askar Sherlief and you're watching news from Kazakhstan. The workers of the Atarau Balık company organized a strike. They're demanding their salary debts to be paid. At the moment, the enterprise must pay more than $200,000 to the workers.
I watched it on television on Monday. Brigadier Skaliev is walking around London after stealing over $100 million, and I cannot get my $100. How much longer will I have to ask my children for money? The fish processing plant is standing idle for 4 months, and the staff has not been paid salaries all this time. Moreover, they have not accrued pensions. Local prosecutors and representatives of the Labor Department intervened when 50 protesters rallied at the Central Square. The strikers were promised to make the company pay them salary arrears through court actions.
В течение 3 дней наш государственный инспектор здесь провел расследование.
The state inspector has spent 3 days here investigating the case. The final amount was $207,000 in salary arrears to 413 people. Now all the materials have been prepared and the state inspector will present them to court shortly.
Сейчас материалы все подготовлены, и государственный инспектор завтра уже передаст материалы в суд.
The statement of American diplomats over the court case of Vladimir Kozlov was immediately refuted in Astana. The Foreign Affairs Office and the Prosecution Office made an official statement. The verdict for Vladimir Kozlov had no political motivation and the process was fair, say the officials.
И говорить о том, что именно дело в отношении Козлова было политическим мотивированным, не приходится.
We cannot say that the case against Kozlov was politically motivated, as it is not what the government wants now, but rather an obligation to investigate all the circumstances that led to the tragic events and mass riots in Zhanaozen.
Обстоятельствах, произошедших в городе Зhanaozen массовых беспорядков.
According to Suindikov, the trial was as transparent as it gets. Independent human rights activists and the press were all allowed to attend every hearing. Moreover, the investigation was quite thorough, and sentences were also passed on the ex-administration heads of Zhanaozen and top managers of local oil companies. That is why it is wrong to assume political motivation only because Kozlov is a politician and oppositionist. The General Prosecutor's Office says there was no selective approach, and the court was presented with irrefutable evidence, particularly the conclusion of a specialized expert's examination. The experts have found elements of social hatred and calls to violent government overthrow in the addresses and conversations of the defendants.
Human Rights Watch expressed its concern over the verdict for Vladimir Kozlov. This hits the freedom of speech and political pluralism, notes the message. Human rights activists believe that Kazakhstan must stop using criminal prosecution in this particular case. Kozlov pays a great price for public criticism of Kazakh government. The United States are also concerned with the verdict of 7.5 years. The US Embassy also publicized an official statement over the case. The United States deeply appreciate the strategic partnership with the Republic of Kazakhstan and its commitment to even greater transparency and democracy. This is the very reason why we express concern over the criminal prosecution of Vladimir Kozlov and obvious use of the criminal prosecution to silence the opposition. On Monday, due to Almaty-Aktau flight delay, many public activists and politicians were unable to be present at the verdict announcement for Vladimir Kozlov, Serik Sapargali and Akjanat Aminov. On Tuesday, they expressed their opinion on the court verdict. They unanimously agreed that the verdict was politically motivated and that authorities are getting rid of dissenters.
Generally speaking, it is a great tragedy when political reprisals gain momentum. This case is certainly politically motivated, similar to the trials over Mukhtar Ablyazov, Kalamjan Zakyanov, Sergei Dovanov, and Yevgeny Zhovtis. The trial is unlawful, the prosecution is absurd, and the investigation was not duly performed, while the criminal case itself is irrelevant. I believe the leadership of the country, represented by the president's family, is in fact responsible for social hatred. The verdict against Kozlov is complete nonsense and very unjust. This is a politically motivated trial held over a politician, not a criminal. It is obvious he was convicted for his political activity, not a crime. I believe in time Vladimir Kozlov will be exonerated. He will be remembered as one of the outstanding people who fought against the regime. The authorities are trying to shift the blame on somebody else so that nobody accuses the president and his administration or anyone else for that matter. They turned Kozlov and Ablyazov into scapegoats and could not care less. Unfortunately, that is the way our current authorities do things.
Activists of Volga Party who observed the process of the opposition leader have left Aktau. Before the flight, one of the activists, lawyer Yerlan Kaliyev, voiced his impressions of the court hearing. According to him, the harsh verdict to Kozlov is an attempt to pressure the opposition. Civil activist Yerlan Kaliyev believes the authorities have distanced themselves from the population, and it's possible that independent media is the next target, since it serves as the main opposition mouthpiece. Kaliyev also believes that it is impossible to return the status of defendant to theatre director Bulat Atabayev after he was made into a witness, and the related statements of Judge Mirzabekov is just a bluff. I believe that Atabayev is a valuable person in the eyes of the authorities. He's an honored artist and they do not need another headache with his case. The most important thing was to gratify the vanity. On Tuesday, Stan.kz video portal was able to record an interview with Serik Sapargali, who got a suspended sentence of 4 years. He was sentenced for calling to overthrow the constitutional order. Sapargali was arrested in January of this year, and all this time he was first kept in the National Security Committee's pre-trial detention facility in Almaty and then in Aktau. In total, he spent 9 months in isolation. Sapargali talked a lot about himself and about people who supported him and about Vladimir Kozlov, who, according to him, is prosecuted for his political beliefs.
Sapargali says that everyone who was sentenced under Article 65 were in fact involved with investigation authorities. The activist does not judge them since he believes that it is a matter of personal beliefs and conscience. Sapargali himself was offered a similar deal in April, but refused to accept it since he could not let people down. I just could not use Article 65 to get out of prison like others did. For instance, Atabayev said something about involvement in crime, but think who was involved there. The three of us who were on the dock. The same with Mamai, who said he was unaware it was a crime and believed he was helping people. Back then I had a good job with a $2,000 salary, and I was also sick. Serik Sapargali believes that only people who were at least once in prison could understand the terrible conditions in detention. The activist has no immediate plans and for now wants to solve all the personal issues that piled up during the 9 months of his detention. In addition, Sapargali needs to get all of his papers back from the authorities, but that is possible only after the copy of the verdict will be ready. At the same time, the activist attorney believes there is no chance to return all the things confiscated during the search. Right now, Sapargali is mostly concerned about the future of the country, and he says that Great Abay foresaw the current events a century ago. Unfortunately, I started smoking again. The works of Abay written a century ago are still relevant today.
The information campaign against the leader of Alga Party pending registration, Vladimir Kozlov, was initiated by state channels Khabar, Kazakhstan and STV. At the day of the trial, in strict secrecy, violating the broadcasting plan during prime time, they showed a film called Immoral Algorithm about Kozlov, featuring him as one of the leaders of organized criminal groups.
Human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtis was not surprised by the release of the documentary. He says similar propaganda methods were commonly used in the 1930s against dissidents and their families. Now Zhovtis believes that there will be a second wave of rehabilitation, when judges and public prosecutors will confess that they have done everything under pressure of the political regime. Activist fellow Mikhail Sizov says that the party is willing to go through the entire legal chain up to the European Court. After the verdict, social activists intend to ensure a status of a political prisoner for Vladimir Kozlov. At the same time, Sizov says that the party will never give up raising social issues and securing the release of their leader.
Такие ресурсы брошены на развенчание и дискредитацию. Ну, смешно. То есть выглядим перед всем миром глупо.
A lot of resources are used to discredit us, but this looks rather ridiculous to the rest of the world because everyone studied history and knows what we have here now. Also, I think that every earnest politician or political analyst read George Orwell's 1984, and what we have now is the 2 minutes hate moments.
Ничего иного, как очередные 5-минутки, ну или 10-минутки ненависти.
State television has never thrown so much mud at the Communist Party, NSDP Azad, and NGOs opposing the political system. This probably indicates that they take us seriously and are afraid of Alga. This documentary proves it. I do not think it intimidates people in any way. On the contrary, I think there will be more opposition members in our country now.
It is quiet in the Almaty's party branch as there is nobody inside besides security, since all the activists and leaders are currently in Aktau. The office hasn't received any provisions or inventory orders yet, although a car with law enforcement officers inside is parked near the building at all times. A similar situation is observed at the party branch in Karaganda. On Monday, Aktau court announced the verdict to opposition politician Vladimir Kozlov, public activist Serik Sapargali, and oil worker Akjanat Aminov. Kozlov was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Sapargali got 5 years of suspended sentence, and Aminov 3 years of suspended sentence. The judge issued a guilty verdict on charges of inciting social hatred, calling to overthrow of constitutional order, as well as establishing and running an organized crime group. The presiding judge Murzabekov found the defendants guilty.
Kozlov Vladimir Ivanovich, Kazakhstan Respublikası Kılmızlık Kodeksinin 235. bölümünün 1. bölümünde.
Все нормально. Это не было.
Everything is all right. This was not a trial. The trial is ahead. This was just a mock trial. This was a crime.
И это преступление, то, что сейчас случилось.
The trial of the opposition members lasted for almost 2 months. During this time, those who observed the trial were able to see what Kazakh judicial system is capable of doing. Human rights activists say that experts from different parts of the country and Russia were testifying that the defendants are guilty against common sense. The witnesses were repeating the same almost word for word. And only Kozlov tried to fight, asking uncomfortable questions, receiving no reply. The world community also followed the trial, however, its opinion was ignored by the court. More details in the next report.
This is the footage from Zhanaozen on December 16, 2011 that everyone saw, and these are the people who have been accused of mass disturbances there. It is hard to believe that those three, Vladimir Kozlov, Serik Sapargali, and Akjanat Aminov, are guilty, but because of the 2-month-long court hearings, it now seems possible. All rise. For almost 2 months, the court listened to the details of the case of the three in order to come up with a verdict. The charge is on 3 clauses that might result in 30 years in prison. According to the prosecution, the 3 defendants organized a crime group, incited social discord, and called for the overturn of the existing constitutional system. Those who followed the events say that everything looks just like the recent trial of the participants of the events in Zhanaozen. Appeals of the defense are delayed, hearings are conducted in Kazakh, and the Russian translation provided for those who are not well versed in the state language is substandard. There is almost no media presence, and on the rare occasion that they are, cameras and voice recordings are not allowed. We have seen all this before, and not only in previous trials. The trial is on. Our country is demanding that spies and traitors are punished and the bastards are crushed. The decree of the Central Executive Committee on changes to the Criminal Code of the year 1934. During the trials on the acts of terrorism against the representatives of the Soviet power, investigation should be completed within 10 days. The verdict should be given 1 day before the court hearing. Here are the comments of those who personally know how the authorities work in such cases. I am convinced that the verdict already exists and that it has been dictated from the very top and is just awaiting its hour. What we see at the court is tailoring of the procedural issues in accordance to this protocol. The prosecution is acting sluggishly. At least today and yesterday, I could not see the usual spitefulness that could be seen in the first days. In just a few days, the tension at the court is seemingly weakened. Kozlov's attorney has to leave the hearing to be at his mother's funeral, and the defendants have a couple of days to look at the case materials, but it would be difficult to review 60 volumes in 2 days. I think, and the lawyers share my opinion, that the procedural code has been grossly violated and prosecutors' explanations are up to no good. If he received this verdict yesterday, he should at least give 3 days to the defendants to familiarize. This is how it should be done according to law. It looks like the judges turned a blind eye on this clause. But Vladimir Kozlov is very capable, and he asked the appropriate questions during the trial. He acted very calmly and spoke professionally, even to the psychologist who gave him very insulting references. Kozlov is acting very well. I wish our Russian politicians were present here. From the first days of the trial, the human rights activists have been saying that there could not be a charge against Kozlov. There is not one. There is no such thing as social enmity to the authorities because the authorities is not a local group. A specially invited Russian linguistic expert, Mikhail Grachov, proved that despite the existing Russian judicial practice, such a group does exist. Other experts also showed the miraculous knowledge knowledge of their signs and kept explaining how the words of Kozlov were used as an incentive for mass disturbances. Then the European human rights activist came forward. From the first days, I had an impression that I was witnessing a well-rehearsed play, a sad one where the tragedy of Zhanaozen was used in order to punish the political opposition in Kazakhstan. There are also indications that similar punishment could await independent media. I will talk about this later on. The main principles of a fair trial, where the defense can familiarize with the materials of the prosecution, are broken. Many call this process accusatory. The witnesses for the prosecution far outnumbered those of the defense. Even those that initially supported the defense would suddenly change their opinion. Civil activists are blaming the defendants, and their statements sound almost similar. Here are the citations from the speeches of Natalia Azhagalieva, Ayman Ongarbayeva, and Talhat Saktaganov. I do not know why Kozlov and Saparkali came. They used our labor dispute for their own purposes, and nothing concrete. Saktaganov mixed his own testimonies, repeating the same statements. I still do not know why did he visit Europe. When they were participating in the strike, they were defending their rights, but today they just betray those who supported them, who gave them a helping hand and risked their lives to help them. Today, when Kozlov, Serik Saparkali, and Akshanat Aminov are in the prisoner's box, these people are blaming them and saying that they did not help them to resolve their problems. But how could they help? They are not the people who should solve problems. This is something authorities should be doing. So they shift the blame to those who tried to help in their struggle for the simple constitutional and civil rights.
Они не в состоянии их были решать.
The defendants stood for their rights up to the very end. Vladimir Kozlov did not admit his guilt and defended himself as a competent lawyer. Saparkali and Aminov admitted the guilt without comments and explanations. Why haven't they done this earlier? During these 2 months, they were under the watchful eyes of the human rights activists from all over the world. Regular Kazakh citizens did not see much, except the journalists for Golos Respubliki and Stan.kz, which are not popular with the authorities.
One of Karaganda businessmen was detained in Almaty near the Economic Court building. According to witnesses, people in masks stopped the car of the head of Silesium Kazakhstan company. Alexander Sutyaginsky, his bodyguards and a driver were taken to an unknown destination. Later it was revealed that this was an operation of the special forces fighting organized crime. Sutyaginsky arrived on the scene to fight in court for the 51% stake in the Russian Kazakhstan enterprise. According to attorneys, the company became the victim of underhand dealing, and the businessman wanted to protect it against illegal takeover. The action itself was captured on video by eyewitnesses, who also found out that Sutyaginsky is charged with a serious crime and needs an attorney. We just called our attorney. Right now we can't comment on the situation, but we are 100% sure that it's a hostile takeover, as otherwise we wouldn't find out about the hearing. This way the 51% stake in the Silesium plant, which is on the list of the top innovative projects, would have been transferred to Basco and we could have lost it. The meeting of Nursultan Nazarbayev and Vladimir Putin was held on Tuesday in Kremlin. As was mentioned earlier, the main agenda of the meeting was the customs union. Vladimir Putin noted the record trade turnover between the two countries in the course of the meeting. At the end of the day, the presidents visited the Great State Theatre for the pop concert dedicated to the 20th anniversary of friendship between the two countries. Vladimir Putin chose this rather informal setting to discuss improved cooperation between Russia and Kazakhstan, as well as within CIS. This reassured many experts that Russia is still looking for its interests in Central Asia. Kazakh opposition demands to make the position of governors to be an elected one and not appointed. They propose to organize a national referendum for this purpose. It is not if it is to happen. This will be the third referendum in the history of independent Kazakhstan. The first one was held in 1995 and was dedicated on the change of the constitution. During the second one, an initiative group was collecting signatures to prolong the term for the president. However, the leader of the nation decided to organize elections after all. What are the chances for the third referendum? Find out from the next report.
At the Tuesday roundtable in Astana, the opposition proposed to place the issue of electing governors on the referendum agenda. At the moment, heads of local executive bodies are appointed by the president, contrary to the constitutional norms, which slows down political and economic reforms. The appointed authorities serve only one person, Nursultan Nazarbayev. They report only to him and are not accountable to the people or anyone else. As a consequence, this leads to election fraud. If governors are elected, the voting won't be rigged and everything will be counted fairly, while campaign programs will be properly implemented. Opinions about the agenda were divided. Some participants say the topical problems and not old issues should be brought up at the referendum. In the opinion of the ex-chairman of Ruhaniyat Party, Serikjan Mambitalin, one such topic could be the placement of a nuclear fuel bank in the country. He says that the economic advantages of such projects are minimal, whereas environmental risks are high. It is also up to the citizens whether such a project is needed. If we declare now that the initiative group is suggesting to raise the issue of the nuclear waste bank at the referendum, we could then signal to the IAEA and try to stop the talks between the organization and the government of Kazakhstan. Organizers of the nationwide referendum could not come to a consensus, and the issue of the referendum agenda remains open for now. At the same time, it is still not clear whether the referendum will take place at all, as its initiation depends on collecting support of 200,000 citizens of the country. The activists say they will easily achieve this goal, but it is unknown if the authorities will accept this.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching and stay well.